Hello, my name is Norma Verdugo, and today I will be summarizing Chapter 5, The Classroom Observation, from Instructional Supervision, Applying Tools and Concepts by Sally J. Zepeda. The classroom observation requires preparation, such as conducting a pre-observation conference, which was described in Chapter 4, followed by selecting a data collection technique and readying for the post-observation conference. This presentation will provide information on selecting a data observation tool as well as preparing for the post-observation conference. Let's get started. The intent of data collection. There are many tools and techniques enabled by supervisors, also known as observers, to collect stable, informative data on teachers. The supervisor then provides the teacher with feedback after choosing one or more of these techniques. The essential question of the observation is, do these data make sense? In terms of the data collection intents, there are three phases of the clinical supervision model. The first is pre-observation conference, where the reliability and usefulness of classroom observation are related to the amount and type of information that supervisors collect. There is the extended classroom observation, where there is a narrow focus that supervisors use while observing classrooms and instruction. And there is a post-observation conference where the supervisor and the teacher look at the data and present it back to the teacher. In terms of classroom observation data collection methods, there are 8 methods in total. The first, described as behavior category. The description is, this is where there is a focus more on teacher behavior than on students. Next, we have a checklist. The supervisor uses a standardized form of checklist to identify which activities or behaviors are present, absent, or in need of improvement. We have the classroom diagramming, which is where an observer tracks and records certain behaviors during a classroom observation. There is selected verbatim notes, where the observer collects every single word said during the observation. Next, we have the open narrative, where the supervisor takes anecdotal notes with or without a focus. There's a teacher design instrument, where the teacher develops their own instrument to audit certain behaviors or teaching they're looking into. There's the audio tape method, where the teacher and or the supervisor audio tapes the classroom events and listens to them later. And lastly, we have a videotape, where the teacher can review the lesson alone or with a supervisor or peer. In terms of data collection techniques, there are 2 techniques that were discussed. They are the wide angle and narrow angle. The wide angle technique refers to capturing a large picture. The narrow angle technique focuses on a single aspect or a few aspects of instruction. Both of these terms are analogous to camera lenses, and they are used to zoom in or zoom out to a specific aspect of a lesson. Next, we have data collection tools based on the wide angle and narrow angle approach. As you can see, most of the approaches are considered narrow, are seen from a narrow lens. Those include selective verbatim, verbal flow, class traffic, interaction analysis, and add task. The last type of lens, the wide angle lens, is collected through anecdotal notes, where notes are taken overall of everything that's going on in the classroom. So how to apply and modify observation tools? There are a few suggestions given by this chapter in terms of guiding your application of the tools. The focus developed in the pre-observation conference should dictate which tool to use. Limit the number of tools used during any given observation. Use seating charts to help you track the events of the classroom, and reflect on how the tool can be modified to collect data in future observations. Using selective verbatim to analyze questioning. So the first tool we're going to look at is an observation guide using Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's taxonomy is a continuum for categorizing questions and responses from the lowest to highest order. The lowest order being knowledge, where one recalls specific facts, and the highest order is evaluation, where one makes value decisions about issues. Teachers commonly engage in question and answer sessions. Therefore, it is very important to analyze both written and oral questions posed by teachers. So our first sample case study is we have a teacher who is seeking feedback on the types of questions that she asks while teaching fractions and decimals. The focus of her observation is she will focus on the level of thinking skills elicited by her questioning. The observation tool directions is that the supervisor or the observer will determine that the best data collection method for this session is selective verbatim. As you can see here, we have a selective verbatim form. The supervisor will record only the questions the teacher asks on the left-hand column. Then on the right-hand column, the supervisor will put a check in the box that best describes the cognitive level of each of the questions. This process may be part of the post-observation conference. In terms of the post-observation conference, there are some suggestions the author proposes. The first is to use the form to identify the level of thinking for each question, to tally the number of questions at each level, and to help and support the teacher to rework a few of the lower order questions into higher order questions. The data collected will lead into a discussion during the post-observation conference, which will allow the teachers to analyze the data, reflect on what it means for student learning, and again, rework the questions from lower to higher order questions. A few possible strategies to start before the next classroom observation are videotaping a lesson that includes the question and answer segment, as well as using a professional release day to observe another teacher. The next tool is using a narrow lens to focus on wait time. Wait time is important because teachers commonly engage in lecture and discussion, and at the heart of a lecture, there is a group processing of knowledge through asking questions. How the teacher responds to the questions is important for two reasons. The first is the quality of response is related to wait time, and the quality of the answer is related to wait time. Stahl in 1994 discussed that giving students 3 seconds or more of an undisturbed wait time leads to positive outcomes such as the length and correctness of the responses increasing, and the scores of students on academic achievement increasing as well. The samples case study presented in Chapter 5 presents a teacher who is seeking feedback on his use of wait time. The teacher and his supervisor agree that the focus for this observation will be wait time. The supervisor determines that a narrow lens tool is the most effective in observing how long a teacher waits after asking a question before he calls the students for a response. As we can see, we have a narrow lens tool in figure 5.20, and this tool can assist teachers on being cognizant of the amount of time of wait time they have between the question and the response. The type of data that they collect can help the teacher and observer examine student engagement and the understanding of concepts as well as the pace of questions asked. Suggested post-observation conference strategies include thinking about the wait time in relation to the types of questions the teacher asks. Moreover, the observer should invite the teacher to review his questions and to analyze their wait time in terms of the types of questions asked, using Bloom's taxonomy. Next, an observer can also support teachers by giving an extended extra data column where teachers will analyze if the questions were asked as a whole class or they were asked to male or female students. The next tool we have is using a narrow lens to focus on cause and effect data. Teachers' actions influence student responses. It is useful to observe a teacher's classroom management, questioning strategies, direction giving, and other behaviors that ask for a student response. The sample case study presented in this chapter presents a teacher who is seeking feedback in terms of his students not following the program during class periods. The focus of the observation is helping the teacher see what his students do, what the teacher says and does, and how the students relate. The observation tool used here is a narrow lens tool that will help the teacher see what they do and the effect of what they do and they say. The cause and effect tool in figure 5.23 provides the teacher with information about the influence of the teacher's actions on student responses. This is helpful in terms of classroom management, questioning strategies, direction, and other behaviors that ask for a student response. The suggested post-observation conference strategies include discussing with the teacher how he thought the lesson went, asking the teacher about his classroom procedures, and encouraging the teacher to consult administration about how to handle situations that escalate beyond what the teacher should deal with. For an experienced observer, this tool can be extended by examining extra data, such as how the teacher reacts to student actions, and to differentiate between the behavior of all students and those of individual students. The next tool we have is using a narrow lens to focus on a variety of instructional methods. As we know, effective teaching uses a variety of instructional strategies and differentiated strategies. Teachers provide alternate approaches to the methods used to present content and the ways in which students show mastery of learning objectives. The sample case study presented in Chapter 5 presents a teacher who is seeking feedback on the variety of instructional strategies she uses during a class period. The teacher and the supervisor agree that the focus of the observation will be collecting baseline data on what instructional strategies the teacher uses during a typical class period. The observation tool takes a narrow lens tool, which will focus on the variety of instructional strategies being used. The tool on Figure 5.25, the variety of instructional methods, is useful in identifying the number of instructional strategies used, the length of each, the activities students engage in during each, and the time and what the teacher and the students are doing at the time. The suggested post-observation conference strategies include having the teacher review the completed instrument and analyzing their own data. Moreover, the teacher will be asked, "What patterns do you see?" Next, we have using a wide angle with no focus. Some teachers might want to get a general idea of how things are going in their classroom. Other teachers might not know what they want to focus on yet. So the wide-angle lens enables the supervisor or the observer to report generally what is occurring in the classroom. The sample case study presented in this chapter presents a teacher who is seeking feedback in a general sense on how things are going in his classroom, especially now that he is incorporating games into the lesson. There is no observation focus, and the observation tool being used is taking running notes, which describe the events of the classroom as they occur with a timeline of activities. As you can see, Figure 5.2a provides running notes with a timeline, where the lecture that took place 10 minutes is at the beginning of the observation, and 5-minute increments after that, describing everything that is going on in the classroom. The suggested post-observation conference strategies include having the teacher examine what students were doing during the game and how he used time throughout the period for students to do independent work. To encourage reflection, the observer can ask the teacher the following questions. What do you suppose students learned through the game? What will you do to follow up tomorrow? How can you assess the value of the game as part of instruction? And do you plan to use other games? The next tool presented is using a narrow focus to track the beginning and ending of class. As we know, effective teachers engage students in bell-to-bell instruction. The first few minutes and the last few minutes are two of the most critical points of a lesson. Research shows that time wasted with beginning and ending class can never really be recuperated. Once the time is lost, it is gone. In this chapter, the sample case study presents a teacher who is seeking feedback on her gaining control of her afternoon class. She is requesting someone to observe her the first and last 15 minutes of her first hour block period. The focus of the observation is a narrow focus, looking at the activities within the first 15 minutes of class and the last 15 minutes of class. The observational tool used is the supervisor will chronicle the activities and procedures the teacher uses, from beginning to end. Here we can see Figure 5.32, which describes the beginning of class routines, looking at the time, the activities, and the student behavior. And Figure 5.33 presents the tracking ending of class routines that also looks at the time, the instruction and activity, and the student behavior. The suggested post-observation conference strategies are